Hello, how are you all doing tonight? We're using trig IDs in our lesson. It's the night of 9/15/15. So let's look at what's in store for us today. We had trig IDs that we gathered the other day. I'm looking over the list now. It looks like we got up to 17. The way we grouped them, there was 17. So today I'm going to just take a moment and find a way to use those trig IDs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to use the trig IDs to come up with certain values. So I'll be looking for the trig IDs on our old papers, so you have to look through your comp book as well. We are going to take the sine of 30, which is given to be 1/2, and we saw why that was when we drew a special triangle and did the opposite over hypotenuse. And cosine of 30 is square root of 3/2. Now, I know you can go back to your trig triangles, special triangles, to find this value, and this is what I'm going to ask you to find, is tangent of 30. However, I do not want you to use your old triangle, the special triangle. I want you to use trig IDs. So we're going to be using trig IDs to find the tangent of 30. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to see a relationship. Given that sine of 30 is 1/2 and cosine of 30 is square root of 3/2, we don't need to look at a triangle to find the tangent of 30 because of the trig ID over here that we learned. And it was right here. Number 7. It said sine of theta over cosine of theta is tangent. So I can say tangent of 30, I can find it by looking for sine of 30 over cosine of 30. Because of that trig ID, sine divided by cosine is tangent. I know these values from here, and I can find this value because these are equivalent. So sine of 30 is given as 1/2 divided by cosine of 30 is square root of 3/2. You divide one fraction by another by flipping the one on the bottom and multiplying, so these two will cancel and I get 1 over the square root of 3. That's unacceptable totally until we rationalize it. Multiplying by square root of 3 over square root of 3, we get the denominator cleared of those pesky radicals, and that gives us 1 times the square root of 3 over, what's the square root of 3 times the square root of 3? Regular 3. So the correct answer is square root of 3/3. And again, we could have gotten that from our knowledge of that special triangle, but I wanted to show you a different method, and you'll be using that method tomorrow. Let's do a couple more of those. Let's say I was looking for the sine of 60. And again, I could use my special triangles, but I'm going to show you using trig IDs tonight. So sine of 60. We learned over here yesterday that there's a relationship between sine and cosine, and that is, what was that numbered? Oops, doesn't look like it's very, oh yeah, here it is, it's numbered 13 and 14. Sine of 90 is the cosine of the other angle in the triangle, and the cosine of a theta is sine of the other angle. So I can use that over here because in this case, if the angle is 60, 90 minus theta, or in this case, theta is 60, 90 minus 60 is 30. So the other angle, the 90 minus theta, is 30. So I can go back up here and I can see that the sine of 60 is the same as the cosine of 90 minus 60 which is cosine 30. And looking up here, I gave you that. Cosine 30 was square root of 3 over 2. So using trig IDs, I can get to that answer. Let's try one the other way. On part C, see if you can work it. Pause the video, see if you can use the trig ID cosine to find cosine of 60. We'll be using the idea from trig ID number 14. Alright, let's see how you did. The cosine of theta over here on trig ID number 14, the cosine of theta is the same as sine d of 90 minus theta. Well, in our problem today, on that part C, theta is 60. So I can fill in cosine of 60 cosine of 60 equals the sine of 90 minus 60. And I think that cosine of 60 is sine of 90 minus 60, which is sine of 30. And I gave you that to start with. Sine of 30 is 1/2. So the sine of 30 is the same as the cosine of 60. So the answer is 1/2. And lastly, part D. Just a short example tonight. Cotangent of 30. The trig ID that helped me with that is not these co-functional relationships, but one more similar to the one like tangent of 30. And that was one of the first ones we did. It was number 8. We have on number 8, right here's the final version, cosine of theta over sine of theta is cotangent. So if I know the cosine and I know the sine, I guess divide one by the other and that will be the cotangent. So do we know the cosine of 30 and the sine of 30? Yes, we do. It's given in the problem. Cosine of 30 is square root of 3 over 2. And sine of 30 is 1/2. When I divide, I flip and multiply. These cancel, and I get square root of 3. All right, do you see how I can use trig IDs to find values in this way? That's all for tonight. We'll be working with trig IDs in class tomorrow after we do some other things. We're going to look at some triangles and we're going to set up our comp books. So bring these examples along with you in your comp book and in your mind, and I'll see that you can do these similar problems. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good evening.